All right, I know you're wondering where have we been. So here's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah. No, 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 no. Hey, I'm not going to let the man tell me what time it is. All right, I'm just saying. Well, see, the way to church is the same for the first half of the way to church is the same as the way to Bolingbrook High School. There comes a turn. And yeah. So Debbie and I are deep in conversation along the way, and then she just happens to mention, "Is this the way to church?" And I said, "Well, I know it's not." So yeah, we had to turn around, and when I say we, I turned around and
It's not just me.
kind of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She was just a nice, friendly. Is this the way to church? Kind of thing. So yeah. So
See, my husband says, "Where are you going?" And I look up and go, "Oh, okay."
hey, we're here, okay?
Brother can attest to that.
All right. So yeah, today is March 19th, and glad you all could make it on time. I trust you were all on time. I don't know because I wasn't. But yeah, it was on this date in 1711 that Thomas Ken died. Thomas Ken, I know. Poor Thomas Ken. Speaking of songs, he was a fellow at Winchester College in England, an Anglican priest and hymn writer. And as part of his dealing with the students, he had written a series of hymns, one for the morning, one for the afternoon, and one for the evening. And two of them are still done. One of them is called Awake My Soul and With the Sun, and the other one is called Glory to Thee, My God, This Night. Now, those may not sound familiar, but what joins these two is the chorus. And the chorus goes something along the line of, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost." So yes, Thomas Ken is the guy who wrote the words to the what we call the doxology. It was not the same tune. Someone later put the tune to it. It was on this date in 1831 that the first U.S. bank robbery took place. They stole $245,000 from the Citibank of New York.
What year did you say?
1831. It was a pair named James Honeyman and William Murray were captured and given 5 years. Interestingly enough, that'd be $50 million in today's money. Most of the money was recovered, okay? But while they were on the run, and this will date some of us, they ran and they were used alias Smith and Jones.
Oh, really?
Yes, seriously, that's, yeah. So, it was on this day in 1917 that the Supreme Court of the United States upheld the 8-hour workday for railroad employees. And that's interesting to me because I just recently read a book about the Haymarket riot in Chicago in 1887, I think it was, 1883, 1887, somewhere in there. And then 10 years later, 1893, was the Pullman strike, all dealing with the 8-hour workday. And it was 30 years later that it took 30 years for it to get into place. But David Livingstone was born on this date. Dr. Livingstone, I presume, explorer, missionary guy in Africa, was born. Also, speaking of bank robberies, Wyatt Earp was born on this date. Wyatt Earp, born in 1848. I believe he's the one who was never shot. Right, it was Doc Holliday. One of those guys was a sheriff, but was never actually shot. In 1860, another birthday. A lot of good birthdays today. William Jennings Bryan was born on this date. William Jennings Bryan, to me, in my opinion, the only presidential candidate who I could truly say, yes, that guy was a believer. Okay. I mean, there's, every candidate at one point says, I'm a believer, kind of thing. But, I mean, to me, William Jennings Bryan is the only one that I would say, yes, that guy was a believer. Famous for many things. He was born in Illinois, by the way. But he's the only major party candidate to run 3 times. He lost all three times, but he ran three times, 1896, 1900, and 1908. But he was born on this date in 1860. And finally, it was on this date in 1944 that William Hale Thompson died. Big Bill. Big Bill Thompson, the last, anybody know? Republican mayor of Chicago. Yeah, he was a piece of work, too. I read a biography of him a few years ago, and there's there are certain past presidents who probably learned a lot from Big Bill Thompson. But that's interesting guy. Died on this date in 1944.
You say there was corruption before the Democrats took control?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe.
Better than the Democrats?
Well, here's the thing. If any of you follow politics, which I do, it's kind of like a sport to me. If you look at this upcoming presidential election and you think, okay, a certain former president who may, in fact, by that time be an ex-con, I hear, there's no way he's going to win. Okay, look at Big Bill Thompson, because Big Bill Thompson lost, and then amidst corruption, et cetera, and then came back and won 4 years later. So it's like it's an interesting comparison. But be that as it may, getting back to other interesting comparisons, today we are talking about Ecclesiastes 2 and 3. So what that means is, yes, today we will be talking about the best known section of the book of Ecclesiastes. If there's one section of Ecclesiastes that everybody knows about, it's this one. That is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Well, we're going to get to 3. We're starting with 2, and then we're going to get to 3. We'll don't go spilling. Yes, seriously.
I was asking my neighbors.
Yeah, it's a talkative bunch. All right. So Ecclesiastes. So again, remember what Ecclesiastes is. Ecclesiastes are the words and thoughts of Kohelet, who either is Solomon or wants you to believe he's Solomon. It's Kohelet looking at the world and seeing how the world operates. At the point when Israel and his authority and power should have been the most influential, if there was ever a time that Israel fulfilled the prophecies and promises that God had, it was during the reign of Solomon. And Solomon says, look, here, things are still bad. This is how the world operates. This is how the world operates under the sun. This is what is the reality of life under the sun. And again, this is kind of a deistic view. Okay, this is not, when Kohelet talks about God, he's talking about the creator God. He's not talking about the covenant God. So it's like, this is what life is like. This is the best we can do. Okay? And he's just a kind of a statement of reality. And you don't have to look at this and say, okay, this is how it should be. No, that's not. Okay? His point is, this is the best we can do on our own. This is what it's like. And he's kind of disappointed about it, because he thought it was going to be better. He thought all these problems were going to cease, and they're not. Okay? So we're going to keep that. Whenever you start talking about Ecclesiastes, that's the point that the author is making. Okay? And we'll kind of see how he does this as we begin in chapter 2. And I think we kind of transitioned here to verse 1. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. And again, meaningless, that's that word hebel, okay, which kind of doesn't mean meaningless in the sense that there's absolutely no worth to it, that there's no reason to do it. It has more to do with the transitory nature, the temporary nature, that there's a benefit, but it's not going to last. Okay, so if you're looking for a deep, result of these kind of things, that's not going to happen. Okay, it's one of those tricky words that gets translated. Every translator picks a different word for that. He says, but that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, which again, I think, I said, Q desires to test pleasure. And then he notes that he is still guided by wisdom. which I just think is, and he says it again later, but I always find that an interesting statement. You know, I'm chasing wine, I'm trying pleasure, I'm trying laughter. Don't worry, I'm still wise. Still wise, you know. I'm in control, kind of thing. You know, it reminds me of the drunk guy at the bar. No, I can drive, kind of thing, you know. But it says, I tried cheering myself with wine. And I wanted to see what was good for the people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. So he's looking around and he says, there's got to be something good here. There's got to be some benefit. Something has to be worth doing. Okay? So he goes on, and verse 4, he starts talking about some of the things he does. Okay? So his building projects here, I'm going to list them out, seem almost Edenic. Like Eden, E-D-E-N, the Garden of Eden. He's going to like recreate things. Okay? I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. Okay? I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. So he's kind of listing all of his accomplishments, all of the things he accumulated, and it just kind of meshes with Solomon's life. Okay, great buildings, great personnel, a lot of slaves, a lot of wives. Okay, he's got a harem, you know, the delights of a man's heart. And it is always one of the questions of this passage is whether the delights of a man's heart refers to the harem or refers to all of the previous thing. I kind of think it's all of the previous thing, but, you know, which would include the harem. But I got all this stuff. Okay, I did all of these things. I have all of these accomplishments. I've got all these certificates on the wall. I've got all these college degrees. I've got all of the, I can point to that, I did that, and I point to that, I can do that. Okay? All these things. Everything should be on fire. I should be like on top of the world. Okay? And of course he says, in all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Again, not to worry, I'm still wise.
Why does it seem like his wisdom is not guiding him? I know he's trying things out and going to test things, but really, you need to actually go that far before you figure out the
Well, the question, yeah.
two separate.
Yeah, the question is why isn't his wisdom guiding him, right? Well, that's a good question. I mean, in looking at the life of Solomon, that's, you know, why? Solomon, what happened here? I'm sorry, you have that, I'm about to say something.
I have a theory for what it's
Okay.
that when he says my wisdom guided me, I was not just guided by whim or whatever.
Yeah.
I planned this out. I had a spreadsheet. I thought about this in advance. It's still a useless endeavor, as he
Yeah.
finds out, but it wasn't just a whim of the day.
Yeah. So I think, that the answer, I was told that in the video, you don't hear the answers, the thing from the crowd. I was told, his point may be that this is intentional, that I planned this, and he expected to find meaning, he expected to find, a great sense of completion in all of this, and he does not. And he goes on in verse, let's see, make sure his great achievements, he has great achievements, but never lost his wisdom. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Okay, so there's a little bright spot. Okay, so again, remember what I said that when he talks about everything is meaningless, it's like not everything is worthless. Okay, so meaningless doesn't mean worthless. He says, I took delight in that I enjoyed the process of doing these things. Okay, I took delight, and this was the reward for all my toil. The joy of doing it was the reward for all my toil. So there is a bright spot. Okay, he says, Q does seem to note one small bright side. My heart took delight. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. There's Q's favorite refrain. When I look back at it, I go, okay, great. now what? You know, it's kind of like, all right, this is not doing for me what I thought it would. I mean, perhaps it's kind of like, you know, we all know the Christmas morning letdown, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think kind of that's what it is. You know, you anticipate it, and then, you know, the gifts are open, and you go, okay, what's next? Okay, you know, now what do we do for the rest of the day, kind of thing. And I think perhaps something, you know, in a small way that might be what he's feeling at this point. Okay, nothing was gained under the sun. Again, that's his refrain. So pleasure. Then he says in verse 12, then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. Okay, you know, he's going to consider wisdom. He's going to think about this wisdom that he was using to guide him previously. Okay, so he's like, I got this wisdom, and this doesn't seem, maybe this is like addressing the question about why isn't his wisdom guiding him? Because to me, he's sort of asking that question. Okay, well, let me think about this wisdom. What has this gotten me? What has this done for me? And also madness and folly. This would be like the opposite of it. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? This is one of those verses that every commentary has a different understanding of what it means. Although I think one of the most likely is that, you know, you would come to the same conclusion. What more can the king's successor? You're going to follow after me and do this? You're going to do the same thing. The same thing is going to happen to you. Okay, you're going to come to the same conclusion. I am, you know, Q is saying here, I am every man in this. It may seem like I'm different, but really I'm just like you all. You've ever seen that where, you know, somebody who is, you know, is worth $100 million stands up and says, I'm just like you blue-collar workers, right? Okay? And in fact, that's one of the key skills of a major, or any politician these days. Despite the fact that you know, that you're clearly not in the same demographic, you have to convince your constituency that you are. Okay, that you have to convince that despite the fact that I, you know, went through an Ivy League school and I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth and everything has been handed to me, you know, and I have all of the right ins and outs. I am just like you out of work steel workers. I'm just like you. And depending on how successful you are, convincing them is whether you're going to win or not. Okay, I mean, it became really clear. Does anybody remember John Edwards' $400 haircut? Does anybody remember that? Okay. John Edwards, you know, he ran for president, I can't remember when it was, 2008, I want to say. And his campaign was the two Americas. You know, there's one America for the rich and there's one America for the poor. And I'm on the side of the poor. I'm gonna be on the poor, you know. And he was doing well. He was getting traction. That's how they say. He was getting some traction. And then it came out that he had stopped at an airport and got a $400 haircut. And then he had a few other indiscretions, you know. Yeah, ones that were about, you know, 19 inches long and 8.7 pounds or something like that. Those kind of indiscretions. But the $400 haircut didn't help. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, so so in verse 13, let me see here. Q considers wisdom and also madness and folly. I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. Okay, so, you know, I've given us some thought. Yeah, and it's better to be wise than to be mad. Okay, it's better, you know, because light is better than dark, right? Except, of course, if your deeds are evil, I suppose, to throw the New Testament line in there. It's kind of along the line of, I mean, that just seems an obvious point. It's like, I've been rich and I've been poor. Believe me, rich is better. You ever heard that line? Okay. And he says, I saw the wise have eyes in their heads while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Okay? The same fate overtakes them both. And what is that fate? Okay, wait a minute. What's the same fate here, okay? Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? If the end is the same for both of us, what's the point of being wise? Okay. I said to myself, this too is meaningless. Okay. This too is meaningless. It kind of reminds me of a story when I was at a class. It was a graduate class, And there was and if you've ever been in a public graduate school, you may have had this, I don't know, maybe a Christian school too. You may have had this experience where the teacher asks a question, and somebody in the class decides that he or she needs to pontificate on whatever that question is. Okay, and so, sure, what do you have to say? And the person just starts rattling off on something, and you're like, this has nothing to do with anything. And
I
so
can't imagine a person ever doing that.
yeah. So I was in this class, and there was a person in the class who was just like, I don't, it's hard to describe how off base she was, off topic, off track, and I turned to the guy behind me, and I said, because I just wanted to double check. Sometimes things are like so off base, you figure you must be wrong, right? You ever had that? You think, wait a minute, did I miss something? I mean, I thought we were talking about baseball, and she's over there talking about Kuwait. Okay, something, so I turned to, and I turned to the guy behind me, and I said, she has no idea what she's talking about, does she? And his reply was a classic to me. He said, no, and she's going to get a master's degree just like us. So at that point, I'm like, what's the point of wisdom here, kind of thing,
It was crystal clear at that point.
Yeah. The thing about wanting these, and maybe some of you have had that experience, that once you desire some credential, something, and you get it, and you realize, then suddenly you look down on anyone else who has it. I used to admire people who had this award or this particular thing until I got it. And then I realized they let all kinds of goofballs in this club, But not that that's happened to anyone, okay? For the wise, like the fool, will not long be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. Remember we talked earlier about one of the ongoing themes that for Kohelet is that death is the great equalizer. Okay? Death is it. Death is the great equalizer. It's like we're both going to die. What's the point? Why go to the trouble? We're both going to die. That's all there is to it. Okay. Did heaven exist? Yes, I believe it did. Okay? It wasn't something that they just created by the rivers of Babylon. All right? It was there. Why wasn't it developed? I don't know. Okay? But it reminds me of another thing my dad used to tell me, or used to say. My dad had a couple of sayings, and one of them was, don't take life too seriously. You're not going to get out of it alive. Okay? And it's like, this is his point. It's like, I'm doing all this wise stuff, and I'm very wise, and I've got all this, and I've got all this. And then there's this guy over there who's just, bumbling his way through life. And we're both going to end up in the same place. Everything we do here is just temporary. Okay? Everything we do here is temporary. So, verse 17, he says, so I hated life. He goes dark. So I hated life. It says here, Q is, as a result of his initial thoughts there in verse 17, Q hates life. Okay? Because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. And now he's kind of obsessed with this idea of the fool, and he's all wise, and what's the difference? What's the point? All of it is meaningless, the chasing of the wind. I hated all the things that I had toiled for under the sun. That's like all the parks and the harem and the slaves, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. So now his problem is, who's going to inherit my stuff? I'm doing all of this work. I'm creating all of these riches, and I've got to give it to somebody when I die, or somebody's going to take it when I die. Okay, you've heard the expression, the first generation earns it, the second generation spends it, the third generation squanders it, kind of thing. He's like, what's the point? I'm going to give this to somebody. Now, maybe at this point, and this gets, weird with inheritances and things like that. What am I going to leave? I mean, we've assured our boys on many, many occasions that it is our life goal to die broke. Okay, we're just kind of planning it. I mean, we want to just right on the 0 point. I mean, like at some point in the future, we're going to do the reverse equity thing on our house, so that there's nothing in the house. We're going to just die completely broke. Okay, If you're watching this, sons, I'm kidding. Not kidding. Okay. But, so he's worried. He's like, I'm going to do all this. And the person, and part of this is like, I did all this and I deserved it. I mean, I did all this. I accomplished all of this. Right? I mean, I'm worthy of all of the acclaim for this. And I'm going to give it to somebody who has done nothing. They just by virtue of the fact that they're in the right family or just, won the right lawsuit or however they got it. They're going to get it and they did nothing to deserve it. And this bothers people and it bothers Kohelet. Okay? And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? Now that's a repeat of one of his earlier statements, kind of what we gain from our toil. All their days, their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. You're doing all this work. It's gonna go. You can't take it with you. Have anybody heard that phrase? You can't take it with you. Why? What's the point? And I think part of the problem here is just his Kohelet's desire for stuff and his attachment to stuff. Okay, so again, I mean, you can that an interesting. I don't think you can draw a whole theology out of it from just this, but I think this is illustrative of that. Again, don't draw a theology out of Ecclesiastes. Just don't do that. Okay, Ecclesiastes is a great illustration of other points, but don't say, well, the Bible teaches right here in Ecclesiastes. You're not on the strongest exegetical grounds at that point. Okay, you may be right, but just not the strong. But yeah, so Kohelet thinks, well, I did this, I deserve it, and now this person doesn't, and that bugs me. Okay, this is kind of not unlike the I forget where it was where one in the New Testament, one of the gripes that the Jews had about the Gentiles being part of the kingdom was, well, they don't deserve it. They're not the chosen people. They don't deserve it. Okay, Jesus' parable about the workers in the field, where you get paid, and I forget where it is, but the parable is that a farmer goes out and hires somebody to work in the field for a certain amount, a talent, and then he goes at midday and he goes out and says they get paid a talent, and then they go out in the last hour, and they pay them all the same thing, and the people who were hired first come back and complain. It's like, wait a minute, they don't deserve the same pay we got, and Jesus' response, as I recall, something like, well, that's the farmer's decision, and it's kind of that whole idea that the Jews are going, the Gentiles don't deserve this, which is similar to Kohelet's attraction to the things that he's accomplished. Okay, interesting, something for you to look into, develop, come back next week, talk about it. But then in verse 24, we have another little bright spot here. A person could do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. Okay, so again, he realizes that, the satisfaction comes in the creation of it, in the work of it, in the process of it, not necessarily in the possession of it. Okay, and I think that's a good lesson as we start looking at our stuff. I think it was Emily Dickinson who said, this world is too much with us. Said, it's like, okay, we're too attached to our stuff. Sometimes, you ever heard the story where people like have a tornado hit their home or their home is destroyed by fire, and on reflection they think, well, it really wasn't that bad a thing. We got rid of all the stuff. You ever think about that as you look at your garage and go, big fire right now would really take a lot of this pressure off my mind, kind of thing. I don't have to worry about all of this, which to keep, which to save, kind of thing. We were talking on the way up. We have too many CDs, right? CD collect. Y'all remember CDs, right? They're like small record versions, Okay.
I put them in bank accounts.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, no. So I told her, I said, oh, maybe this week I'll go through and I'll kind of pick out ones that I'm never going to listen to again, or think kind of get rid of some of these, because we've got this pile of CDs in our house that we for a number of reasons. It seemed like a really good idea at the time to get this album, and then you get it and you listen to it once and you're like, it's not that good. You put it on the shelf and there it is, But the trouble is the CDs are in a cabinet. They're like out of sight. So, except for the ones that are piling and stacking around in other places. Yes, dear, I will get to that. It's on film. You have a record. Of course, I could edit this part out. I never said that. I'm just kidding. Yes. But where am I here? Let's see. Q is worried about who will inherit his treasures. A person can do no better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in Q's universe, that is, under the sun. Okay, that's it. I mean, it's under the sun, on your own power. That's really what that's the benefit. That's what you get. Okay. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? Okay. This is that creator God. We're here, so we acknowledge there's a God. We acknowledge his role, but it isn't the covenant God that he's talking about. It isn't the Yahweh of the Old Testament that he's talking about here. Okay. To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Okay? Which it really is an interesting statement, because it kind of seems not contradictory, but at least not running the same direction as this previous statement. It's like, so if this is true, but to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Well, that's a good thing, right? And yet earlier he's talked about it as being a bad thing, that he's collected all of this. So maybe if you're a good person, in Kohelet's mind, if you're a good person in collecting money, your money is going to go to a bad person. But if you're a bad person, it's going to go to a good person. I don't know. Just, again, it seems that, and again, it's okay, because, again, Kohelet is not creating a systematic theology here. Okay, so it's okay to go, well, okay, maybe he's just, maybe he's doing one of these, on the one hand, bum, 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 but on the other hand, da, 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 da. Okay. But this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Okay. Now his observation here is not necessarily a good thing. Okay. Just because Kohelet says this doesn't mean he's like, oh, this is how it ought to be. Okay. So again, I maybe that's kind of a big point to think about with Ecclesiastes, is that when Kohelet says this is what it is, he's not saying this is the way it ought to be, nor is he saying this is the way God wants it. He's just saying this is the way it is. And as we get into chapter 3, we're going to see really, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Okay. One who pleases, where am I here? This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Okay. And then we get to chapter 3. Any questions before I rattle into chapter 3? Everybody's favorite?
I just wonder if the seeming contradiction, that the good man's stuff goes to a bad man and vice versa. So, if you're a Republican, your inheritance goes to a Democrat. If you're a Democrat, your inheritance goes to a Republican. See how useless it is.
Yeah.
You can't even pass on your legacy to someone who shares your values.
Okay, chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. Okay. It is possible that this passage is a borrowed poem. Some have suggested that it is a borrowed poem that was floating around at the time. I don't think so. Your teacher believes, YTB, no. Your teacher believes no, or doubts it. But it could be. I mean, and the reason I say that is because there's clearly a stylistic difference between these 8 verses and the verses before and the verses after. It does kind of stick out. And so some have thought, well, you know what, this is just kind of a popular idea. And Kohelet is using this to say it's not really what you think it is. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with it. And so that's certainly possible. I also think it's possible that Kohelet just was in a lyrical mood when he wrote this part. Okay? But what it is, and I think as we look through this, and I'm going to just read it through in a minute here, this is kind of just a bird's eye view of life under the sun. Okay? So this life under the sun, what it's like, what big picture ideas can you see under the sun? Okay, and beginning with verse 1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to peace, a time for war and a time for peace. So if anybody knows anything about the book of Ecclesiastes, they know about this passage. Okay? And they know about this passage courtesy of Pete Seeger. Okay? Pete Seeger, pardon me?
Birds?
No. They come later. Pete Seeger was a folk singer, folk writer in the 1950s. He gained prominence in the 1950s. Folk singer, songwriter, activist kind of thing. Among other songs that he wrote the song Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Is anybody familiar with that song? He wrote Where Have All the Flowers Gone? He wrote the song If I Had a Hammer. He's also the one who is credited with applying the We Shall Overcome song to the civil rights movement. Okay, now he's a white guy, but still he was very much an activist, very liberal for the day kind of guy, very well known. In terms, and again, we are huge folk music fans today. There's still a folk music scene. There's actually a great concert series that happens like once a month in Hinsdale that we go to, and Pete Seeger is very often referred to as kind of one of the, like if in the rock and roll universe, people will talk about Chuck Berry, or they'll talk about the Beatles nowadays. Okay, these influences from way back when, and people in the folk music will talk about Pete Seeger along with Woody Guthrie as like two of the main influences. So Pete Seeger writes this song in the late 1950s. In fact, he didn't really do much writing of the song itself. Okay, the song is pretty much lifted straight from the version that he used. Okay, and when it became popular, he recorded it, and then a couple of other people recorded it, and then it didn't take off until 1965 when the Byrds recorded it with the 12-string guitar, and that's the version that you all are hearing in your head. Okay. And that became a number one hit. And so it has an unofficial record of being the number one pop song with the oldest lyrics. Not that that's a really, something to strive for, but it is almost entirely lifted from Ecclesiastes, okay? And as it became popular, and it's been recorded many, many times by Dolly Parton did a version of it. It's been recorded many times, and I went down a YouTube trail, black hole. Has anybody done this? Gone down this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. And I went down a YouTube black hole trail of all the times Roger McGuinn has shown up at other people's concerts to sing Turn, Turn, Turn. That's the name of the song, okay? He showed up at a Bruce Springsteen concert, and I forget who else, a couple of others. But be that as it may, what Pete Seeger did was he took the song and he divided up the royalties in such a way that like 50% of the royalties went to one charity and 45% of the royalties went to another charity, and he kept 5% of the royalties, and his reasoning at the time was that, well, he added 6 words to the song. The turn, 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 that is one of them, and then at the end of the song, I pray it's not too late. That was Pete Seeger's contribution, and for that he's only keeping 5% of the royalties. But be that as it may, so people know about this song, and if you know, oh yeah, that's a great song, sort of thing. Well, Pete Seeger looked at it as it being an anti-war song, because he was very much against the U.S. involvement in Vietnam, which was ramping up at that time. And you could look at this whole thing and see it in the light of an anti-war or kind of the reality of war, right? It's possible you can look at this way, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down, a time to build, okay, like in a battle, and then of course at the end, a time for war and a time for peace. Okay, it ends up there. You can see it that way. So it could also be seen as an anti-war statement. This was the sentiment of the famous song written and first performed by Pete Seeger, Seeger. Okay, he died, I think, in 2014. So he was alive for quite some time. And I just make the point to me, and again, this is the YTB, your teacher believes, this is not meant to be uplifting. Okay, this is one of these songs. Oh yeah, that's so great. I love that song. This is so great. Kind of thing. It's like one of those where the jaunty lyrics kind of belie the fact that wait, this isn't really a happy thing. Like there's this one song. Have anybody heard there's an Anne Murray song, Snowbird? Does anybody know that song? Very bouncy, very happy song. Oh yeah, this is great. It's got a bouncy tune, cute, nice voice, kind of thing. If you ever listen to the song, she's lamenting the fact that she got dumped. The one I left has run away or something. I can't remember the exact words of the song, but I thought, wow, this is a pretty sad topic for this bouncy tune kind of thing. But again, I don't think this is meant to be uplifting. Okay, I'm not trying to be a downer here today, but I guess I am. This is not meant to be uplifting. Let's look at it a little bit. Again, it's very familiar and it's pretty obvious. And I think the point is Kohelet is looking down and his big major point is there is just this things happen over and over and over and over again, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's almost a fatalistic view. It's like, this is going to happen, and why bother? Why even try? Okay? So he says, to everything there is a time. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. It's interesting that in the first verse here, the word time and seasons are two different words. Okay? And the first word, the first word is the more, I think it is, in the Hebrew, the first word is the more common word for time. And that's the word that's translated, what's translated season here in verse 1 is translated time in all the other verses. I don't know why. But they're kind of used, to mean the same thing. Synonymous. Simultaneously and synonymously. Okay? But be that as it may. So, and he's just talking about there's just a point in time where these things happen. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot. Now, this is interesting that again, when you think, okay, what would be the opposite of planting? There's a time to plant and there's a time to harvest. No, that's not the word he's using. There's a time to just pull it up. Okay? And again, if you look at it from this anti-war thing, it's like, well, you plant if you want to feed your troops, and you uproot them if they're the bad guys. This kind of a scorched earth policy, but that's kind of the direction they go. It's sort of like at Shea Ray, that it's a major day when you take down the garden. Okay? There's no harvesting going on. There's a lot of ripping up and throwing out and all of that kind of stuff. So again, there's a time to plant, and there's a time to just rip it all up. Okay? A time to kill, and a time to heal. Okay? So again, you don't want to go to Ecclesiastes and say, listen, it's okay for me to kill somebody because it's his time. Bible says there's a time. Yeah, I don't think so. He's just saying this stuff happens. There's a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build. Okay? A time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And I think he's just talking about the reality of emotions here, that these emotional cycles happen, that sometimes things are good, sometimes things are bad. Again, what can you do about it? A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. Now this one has really thrown people, and by throwing them, I think, again, as with a lot of Ecclesiastes, we just don't know really what he's talking about here. It's one idea that this has something to do with sexuality. The time to have kids, the time not to have kids. Or another idea is it has something to do with war. There's a time to gather stones, okay, and there's a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. That is in the enemy's fields. You throw stones in the enemy's fields. When we were in Israel, That was one of the things in Israel, especially, something about the earth there. The earth grows rocks there. I don't know how. It just rocks grow, and so there was this field we went to. We're driving down the road, and this is how it was when you travel with Ray Vanderlyn. You're driving down the road, and he just tells the bus driver to pull over on the highway. Literally, just pulling over on the highway. Everybody out. 60 people out of a bus. Climb over the embankment, down the hill, and then there's this row of fields. Okay, so literally, it's like you're driving down 355, and you just pull over to the side and get out and go off to this field. And we went to this one particular field, and he gave a challenge about removing things in your life and all that, and I'm taking it a different direction. But my point was, then we spent like an hour or so pulling rocks out of this field. Okay, and so you kind of walk around and just pulling rocks out of the field, and the vision and the lesson that we were given was to kind of look at what what is in your life, what is in your heart that's holding you back, right? Do I have that kind of close enough? Yeah, it was led in from that. And so we went through the whole field and spent an hour there pulling up rocks, and we all walked over to this pile of rocks that was on the side, and it was it was like that high, and it was probably like 10 feet in diameter to maybe 15 feet in diameter. This pile of rocks, and we were going to throw these on the pile, these stones on this pile of rocks. And the interesting thing is that pile of rocks was Ray Vanderlyn's pile of rocks. Okay, and like every time he brought a group there, he'd come to the same field, they'd pick up the rocks, and they'd go over there and they'd throw the rocks onto this pile. So we were like the 10th, 20th, 50th group that had been through there picking up rocks out of that field. And we had no problem finding rocks in this field. Okay, it's not like you're in a gravel yard picking up rocks. We're in this field picking up rocks. There were plenty of rocks there. But wait a minute, look at this pile of rocks that had already been pulled out of this field. Kind of thing. But the point was, rocks get in the way of growing things. All right? And so one way to disrupt your enemy's crops is to throw rocks on their field. Then they have to go through and they have to pull the rocks out again. Okay? And there's people that are going to do that. There's a time to do that, a time of war, time to gather. When you want to grow something, you have to go back out and get them. A time to search and a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Okay, a time to search and a time to give up. Okay, so which is kind of interesting, especially in the light of Luke 15. Okay, Luke 15, you remember that's the passage where Jesus tells the three parables: the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost son. Where the point there is of the people who don't give up looking. Okay. And again, but you think about this, there is a point in time. If you ever lost something, you can't find it, and you come to the point where you just give up. I don't know where it is. It was, usually for me, it's like my car keys, right? That's it. I'm just, no. You just give up. All right? It's just people they're going to look, they're going to give up, kind of thing. A time to keep and a time to throw away. Like if you have like a bunch of CDs, you should just throw them away, maybe. A time to tear and a time to mend. Okay, some think that they're talking about mourning there, like mourning as in mourning. That rent your clothes, tear your clothes. That was kind of one of the things that how did you know that they were seriously in mourning? Because they're ripping their clothes. Now the clothes were different. It was just like one piece sort of stuff, and you could rip it. And then of course after the mourning was over, you got this ripped item of clothing. Well, what do? You sew it back up again. Okay. So there's going to be a time of mourning, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Okay. So again, a time to love and a time to hate. Okay. Well. This is just, again, he's just looking at the cycles of life, the circle of life. I should be holding up a small lion cub here. These are just cycles that go on. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just going to happen. This is what life is like under the sun. People are going to love, people are going to hate, people are going to embrace, people are going to refrain from embracing, people are going to weep, people are going to laugh. There's going to be somebody gathering stones, there's going to be somebody scattering stones. What do workers gain from their toil? Okay, this is a repeat of a question from chapter 1. What's left over? What's left over out of this? These cycles happen, and we have no control. There's nothing you can do about it, kind of thing, okay? So to me, that's what Kohelet is saying. It isn't necessarily that, okay, if you're laughing or if you're weeping now, at some point under the sun, your weeping is going to be turned into dancing, or I can't remember what the verse is. Turn my mourning into dancing, like crying into whatever, There's no guarantee that, okay, hey, the Bible teaches that you're only going to do this for 6 months and then you're going to be happy. Okay? It's not. It's just like we have no control over this. He's like, what's the point? There's nothing left over for us. We have no control over this. So to me, I'm like, again, it's a very poetical way to say, well, you are, what's the point? Where am I here? The term not meant. Second statement is not harvest. Oh, the second statement is not harvest, but to uproot. 3:5, often seen as sexual, but is probably talking about war. There's a time to give up looking for things. They'll see that. There are people that give up. Should they give up? Well, not according to Luke 15. Okay. Probably verse 7, probably referring to mourning. Verses 9 and 10 suggest cues disillusionment. What do we get out of this? And again, compare chapter 1, verse 3 and verse 13. Okay. Where am I? Here I am. What do workers gain? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. Remember in chapter 13, or in chapter 1, verse 13, he says, I have seen the heavy burden God has placed on us. Again, it's kind of like, wow, we're really stuck here. We really got a bad deal here. It's almost like a buyer's remorse on the part of the human race here. It's like, hey, this isn't working out well. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Okay? Now, this idea here where he says he has put eternity in human's heart, you think, oh, wait a minute. I thought you said that there isn't an idea of eternity or an afterlife. And I don't think that's what he's talking about here. I think the point that he's making here is it's pointing to man's recognition of his or her smallness in the life, in the face of everything. And go back to his worry about what's going to happen to his inheritance. He recognizes that the world is going to go on without you. Okay? That when I die, that's it. But the world is going to go on. There's a couple of, I can't think of any particular one, but I know there's a couple of these kind of breakup songs. I get a kick out of breakup songs. I don't know that Pete Seeger ever wrote a breakup song. But there's a couple of breakup songs that where the topic is sort of like, I broke up and my life got better, kind of thing. The sun kept coming up and, had a good day and went to my work and everybody was happy and just, and I'm getting over you and I don't need you anymore. There's one song I can think of where it's an Australian singer and the song is called Little Bird. And, the verses are, Little Bird told me that if I do this, this, and this, you'll take me back. And if I do this, this, and this, you'll take me back. Okay? And then the chorus is, but I don't want you that bad. Okay, I don't want you that bad, kind of thing. Like, I'm not going to do it. So it's a happy breakup song, kind of thing. Go on a YouTube trail, Pete Seeger, breakup songs. I'm just kidding.
This one is My Fair Lady. Without you, and without much ado, we will all muddle through without you. We'll still spin on its axis without you.
There you go. All right.
England still will be here without you. That song.
There we go. Okay, a breakup song from My Fair Lady, Without You. Okay, so yeah. So he said. So, and I think that's what he's talking about here. Again, it is in a sense. I don't believe it. And again, remember what I said about Ecclesiastes. There's like, for how many commentaries are there? That's how many views there are on it. Okay. But I think here that's just kind of, they said eternity. That you know that you're not the be all and end all. You know that the world, deep down, you know that once you die, you're out of here. That's it. All that you worked for is under someone else's control. Okay? And I think that's what he's talking about. Even though sometimes this verse is used as a support text as proof of an eternal life, or as a doctrinal support of the doctrine of heaven, teaching on heaven. Okay, again, not the strongest. You can go there. It's not the strongest support, not the strongest proof text. I think sometimes when we what I mean by proof texting is where you make a statement. This is how the world works, and then you just rattle off a series of verses that have that idea in them, and you think, well, I win because I've quoted 8 verses and you've only quoted 7, so I win. I must be right, kind of thing. That's not the best argumentative approach or persuasive approach, because sometimes you got to think, okay, does that verse really say that? Every once in a while, if you read any Christian book, they'll put. It's interesting and sometimes depressing. You read a book where they make a statement and they'll say, they'll put a verse. So I'll go open Bible, look at the verse, and go, how does? And you're like, okay, was there a misprint or something? This happened to me yesterday. I was looking at a verse. And I'm going, I do not see how in the world that verse relates to this point. Does that ever happen? Does that ever happen to you? Yeah. That was all the time. So just the fact that you can throw a verse in there. Don't get me wrong. Verses are good. Passages are better. Whole books are even better. But sometimes you can say, yeah, it's not a good proof text for that. But people do it anyway. So the next time you hear somebody use that verse as a proof text for eternity, you can excuse me, or maybe just give a full-on die heretic, if you want, I'll repeat it so it'll get on the, Debbie said die heretic. Let it be known, Debbie said die heretic. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. So there, again, another bright spot. You can be happy. You can do good. Okay? I know that, and there's nothing better. Okay? Let's see, where am I? Setting eternity in the hearts pictures man's realization of his smallness and not necessarily the idea of a glorious eternity somewhere. Despite the inevitability of things, nothing is better than to be happy and to do good. So you know what? There is happiness. You can do good. Okay? This is, again, one of the bright spots that he sees. That you got this cycle, but still, despite this, you can still be happy. You can still do good, kind of thing. Where am I here? That each of them, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. Okay? So, one point here is that the point of Ecclesiastes is not necessarily to say you have no reason to be happy. There's nothing that, you kind of focus, and perhaps it's just more of a focus on what's attainable and then what's not. Don't spend your time worrying about your generation, what's the posterity, okay? And again, if you get into like the English Shakespearean history plays, and even just English history or any history of kings, having a son was a huge thing. We can go out and talk about Henry VIII here, but having a son, having an heir was a huge thing. You just really had to have a son to get that whole legacy thing taken care of. And then, when a president, especially if he makes it to the second term, starts worrying about his legacy, starts worrying about what that is. You know what? Just God made you to, the Creator God put you here. Enjoy it. Okay? Don't worry about what you can't change, because you can't change this. Don't worry about what you can just do good, and be happy in your time that's here. You might as well, verse 14, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Okay? That's an interesting passage. Well, first of all, I look at it and say, well, you might as well do that because there's nothing you can do about it. And verse 15, God does that so people will fear him. That's an interesting passage. Again, that's another one of those that depending on what translation you use, you'll have like radically different ideas. Like one other way to translate that is God will continue to chase the pursued. Okay? So it's like, okay, what is, again, this is one of these weird things about Hebrew. And again, I'm not a Hebrew scholar at all. I don't even know Hebrew letters. Okay? Greek I've taken. Hebrew, no. Okay? So I'm completely at the mercy of, the commentator here. But it's like you can have two passages in Hebrew based on, and because there's not a lot of comparisons, and one will come up with God chases the pursued, and the other one will say God does it so they will fear him. Okay? Or so perhaps if you just look at the NIV translation and say, well, all of this is just so that God lets you know who's in charge. Okay. All right. And then verse 15, whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before, and God will call the past to account. Okay? So again, what's going to happen is going to happen. There's going to cycle to these. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay? God, verse 3:15 echoes chapter 1, verse 9, as well as reinforces the idea of a cycle of repetition. That is, that things happen. What's happened before will happen again, and God chooses the past, will call the past to account. So it's like, you know what? Be happy, do good, because these bigger things that you're worrying about, there's nothing you can do about them. And to a certain extent, that's true, But then we have to get, again, Kohelet is giving us, this is what life is like under the sun. This is what life is like without an active, intervening, personal God kind of thing. Okay, so again, we should not look at this and think, wow, this is depressing, even though it is to a certain extent. But it's like, yeah, this is the best that it's going to get. Going to do it on your own? You don't need God? Okay, great. Ecclesiastes is going to be the roadmap of your life. Okay? But and I think in you looking at it from a New Testament perspective, you could say this kind of points out, the importance of God's intervening in the world with the cross. Okay, I'm trying to leave on a little bit more of an upbeat, than Ecclesiastes allows. Then in verse 16 you see, and I saw something else under the sun. Where he says, I saw something else in verse 16 indicates a change of subject. So we'll get into that next week. What is he going to talk about next? Any questions, comments, complaints, words of wisdom? Great thoughts at large. We're going to go humming bird songs today.